Okay. Hey everybody, good to see you. I'm Parisa with Empower DC. We're gonna give it a couple more minutes as some people roll in. I hope everybody got to step outside, at least for a moment. Today and yesterday it's been just lovely, hasn't it?
Sure has been.
Yeah, so far I've just seen it through the window, but
Oh no, you've got to go out. It's been calling me all day. Yeah, springtime in DC is definitely my favorite season here. So let me give it a couple more minutes before we officially get started. But as we welcome people in, if anybody is new to this particular space, let me say that this is the time of each month that the DC Environmental Justice Coalition meets. And we are a group of individuals and organizations working on a variety of environmental justice related issues across the district. Issues like lead exposure, asthma, air quality, land use issues, waste stream issues, solar and renewable energy issues. So if this is something that you'd like to be part of, please do let us know. We have a little email list for this group. And again, the group meets the second Tuesday of the month at 4 o'clock by Zoom. And today we opened up the space to more of our friends who may be interested in today's topic. If you don't mind, as you're joining, you could go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, particularly for the benefit of our guests here at Office of Planning, so they can see the range of folks that are in the room. And so today we're going to be focusing on the comprehensive plan, and hopefully everybody has heard of it and will be learning a lot about it. And I will say Empower DC has learned a lot about it over the last 20 plus years of our work, but especially during the amendment cycle that took place from 2017 to 2021, 5 years, during which we convened the DC Grassroots Planning Coalition. We held monthly meetings at the usually at the Union Temple Church in Ward 8, and we engaged over 1,500 people in talking about the comp plan and trying to create suggested improvements to the plan. And some of the outcome of that included us playing a role in expanding the priority of racial equity in the comp plan, adding it as a guiding principle, creating some specific language requiring planning and zoning to be carried out with a racial equity lens, and some other specific things as well, some language around Berry Farm, some work specific to Ivy City, and a few other things. The requirement for a anti-displacement strategy to be developed. So I think part of what we'll hear today is I'm sure you'll hear our guests mention some of those specific things, and they're about to tell you that the comp plan is being completely rewritten. So here we're part of this, the city's in the midst of this planning process to completely rewrite it. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our guests from Office of Planning. I think we have 3 folks on the line, but I'll let you guys, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and, take it from here. And yes, again, as people join, just go ahead and put your introduce yourself in the chat, and then as we're going, go ahead and put questions in the chat, and we will create some space to share those questions. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Parisa. I really appreciate you having us here today. We're really excited to talk with this group. Conversations like this are part of what makes the city a better place. So we appreciate you making the time. We know everyone's busy. I want to give a little bit of framing about what to expect. We're halfway into the process of imagining what this comprehensive plan is going to be. What that means is that we started to get some clarity about where we're heading, and we're preparing for a series of public workshops on the March 18th and 21st And what we're going to be focusing on in those workshops are what the new future land use map will look like. So we're going to share our initial ideas to get feedback. It's a really important point to engage. So that's the big thing I want to kind of prime this conversation with is please come to our workshops on the 18th and 21st. We're going to be sharing some new ideas about how the city will grow and change. We're not going to be able to share those today, but we expect to release those next week, that information next week. So that's the big picture of where we're heading. And today we're going to share an overview where we are in the process. And we know there's some questions about how to approach the how we're going to approach environmental justice through this comprehensive plan. So we're going to talk about our approach to racial equity, some ideas around environmental justice. And we hope to have a discussion around where we can go from here. That sound all right? All right. Nick's going to take and give an overview so that we all have a common ground to talk to figure out how to move forward on this project together. Nick.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So my name's Nick Kushner. I'm a senior planner within the citywide division of the Office of Planning, and I'm the project manager for DC 2050. We also have a couple additional colleagues from the Office of Planning with us, Stephen Geyer. I don't know if you wanted to say hello, and then Nadia Cisa.
Sure. Hi, I'm Stephen Geyer. I'm the lead sustainability planner with the Office of Planning. Nadia?
And I'm Nadia, community planner with the Citywide Planning.
Great. So we have a short presentation we'll go over, kind of laying the groundwork for where we are, and kind of what we're considering as we approach, as Parisa said, rewrite of the comprehensive plan, which doesn't mean we're throwing out all of the great comments and kind of engagement that was undertaken in 2021, but means we are having an opportunity to revisit the overall structure and hopefully come to a much clearer, more concise document that's more user-friendly and really kind of sets the groundwork for the district for the next 25 years and is clear about what we intend and what we mean through our policies. So I'm going to jump right into it. So just as a starting point, what a comprehensive plan is, as we've kind of alluded to, it really sets the long range vision for the district. It creates land use policy for the entire city and signals the priorities for the district, both the administration and all of the agencies that kind of make up the city government, where we'll spend money, where we'll make investments on capital facilities, infrastructure moving forward. So it really is an important document, not just for what can be built where, but also how the city allocates its resources across communities. This is where we are in the process today. So we started our engagement in March of 25, where we kicked off a visioning process where we were meeting people where they were across all neighborhoods of the district. We engaged with a lot of community-based organizations and local groups to join their pop-ups. We set up tables across the different festivals in different areas. And engage people where they were to try to hear their top priorities for what they wanted to see DC 2050 address. We are now shifting our engagement slightly to kind of a different format where we're trying to have deeper conversations with communities and groups, particularly those groups which aren't always part of the comprehensive planning process. So we've really targeted outreach with residents in wards 4, 5, 7, 8, BIPOC residents, residents with disabilities, youth, older adults, and also immigrant communities. And so we're partnering with a number of community-based organizations to help us reach those groups through dedicated focused conversations through a focus group model, and are still offering these broader citywide opportunities for engagement. In this phase, we're really talking about how we grow and where we grow. So what does that growth look like, and where are there opportunities for us to expand the types of housing that we have, and the creating different levels of affordability through that new housing and commercial retail space. We are going to be engaging, as Ryan said, in March and continuing to have some ways to provide feedback through the spring. And then we will be working to kind of draft the initial policies that go into the plan and come out with a draft plan in the fall of this year, which we will then be having a very robust engagement process across all parts of the city, really soliciting public comment on all of the policies and proposals within the draft plan in the fall, going into the winter. And then our goal is to have a plan submitted by the new administration to the DC Council in June 2027 that would then enter the legislative process and have hearings and debates within council before it goes through the whole kind of federal review process as well. And our hope is that it would be implemented by early 2028. So that is the timeline that we're setting and sticking to as we get into the 5 phases of the plan. So this is just a little recap of who we reached from our first round of engagement. We had a vision survey that hopefully a number of folks saw and took, which reached over 2,000 residents. We've also, as I mentioned, touched all wards of the city through different events and pop-ups. And we also have had a series of workshops. Our most recent were in November, where we engaged around our proposal for growth and our initial FLUM, our initial future land use map translated from the land use designations today into a new type of land use designations, which I'll talk about in a minute, called place types. We have an engagement summary report that is on our website, which you can download. That QR code will take you right to it. That lays out who we reached from these engagements. We know that there were certain communities that we were not able to reach as deeply as others. And so that is why we're really doubling down on this focus group strategy in this second phase. Some of what we heard in phase 1 was that there's a lot of interest in different levels of affordability of housing and also different types of households that support the different sizes and the different shapes and intergenerational types of living that we see in the district. Residents also want access to grocery stores, transit, and parks and recreation. We were happy to hear that 3/4 of the folks that we talked to see themselves living in the district over the next 10 years. And we want to make sure that 100% of people have the opportunity to do that if they so desire. And that people really felt like they had pretty decent access to reach the various amenities that they wanted to within the city, but that east-west connections still pose some barriers, and that we need to think about that in our growth strategy and kind of our longer range plans for adding connectivity between neighborhoods. So right now we're in phase 2 of the plan, which is, as I mentioned, kind of how and where we grow. We are introducing a new approach to future land use planning called place types. So that is a big move within DC 2050. It is one of those types of moves that a rewrite allows us to do, which in an amendment cycle, it would have been very difficult to introduce such a structural change as this. Place types is kind of a leading best practice across various jurisdictions across the country that we've looked at that have been doing recent comprehensive planning, from Denver to Memphis to Dallas. I know that those cities aren't all one-to-one comparisons with DC, but we're taking the elements of how they've deployed place types and adapting that to the DC context, so that we can kind of learn from them and also improve and make it contextual to the district. So what are place types? Place types are an expansion of the current current land use designations that we have in the future land use map. Right now, the future land use map really designates the use of a building and the density, the height and the density of that building. Place types add to that by also providing guidance on the public realm and the connectivity between neighborhoods, things like retail guidance. So there's more built in, there's more policy baked into place types so that you get the whole user experience, and not just the building envelope and kind of what the building will look like. Because when we experience neighborhoods, we experience everything that the neighborhood has to offer, not just from the building line and the parcel line. So place types is both a way to kind of center and capture a number of policies in one place. It also is much more user-centered for how we're talking about what our proposed policy change means for residents in a community. So those are, that's a key goal of place types. We do want this plan to be very people-centered and to be easy and usable and much more navigable for a member of the public to pick up and understand what policies relate to their neighborhood. And so place types is a way that captures all of that in one place. It also is a way to make sure that we're applying the same levels of land use policy standards across all of our neighborhoods as a way to achieve better equity, so that we can see those neighborhoods that are lacking more in the access to the opportunities, and so that we can target particular policies and strategies to reach into those communities more. As I mentioned earlier, in November, we had some workshops where we released this map. This is a kind of a simplified or a clearer version of what is the future land use map today, translated into place type categories. So right now we have a number of different land use categories and cross hatching among them. So when we have a mixed use site, it will take a category of residential and a category of commercial, and it'll cross hatch those together. So you have a number of different cross hatch categorizations. So you can have like a moderate scale residential with a low scale commercial. In our place type translation, we have condensed over 55 categories of cross-hatching down to 3 types of centers. So that is a really big change and a really big way to clarify the policy intent around these mixed-use centers. And so this map won't look that different, shouldn't look that different from the future land use map today in the current plan. And as Ryan mentioned, next week when we have our workshops, we're going to be presenting our initial policy proposals for how we are thinking about changing this future land use map to add additional opportunities for growth throughout the city. So here are some assumptions and considerations as we move into that conversation around where and how we grow. So we know from our most recent COG forecast, the district is still anticipating growth. We are taking the long range view to grow. We are not going, we are looking past kind of the current environment and the recent federal job loss within the district, and looking long range over the next 25 years to still estimate that we'll add about 145,000 additional residents and 175,000 additional jobs. We want to make sure we have the capacity and adequate capacity to capture that growth and be able to accommodate it, as well as not have housing prices rise because we don't have enough to meet the demand, enough supply to meet the demand. We are also really focused on producing a fair and equitable distribution of housing across all parts of the district, so that it isn't just 1 or 2 areas that are absorbing the extent of a lot of our growth, that growth is spread across all parts of the district, because we know residents have different needs across different parts of the district and want to see different types of housing everywhere. I see Nina has a question. I don't know, Paris, if we want to take
I'm sorry, this is a technical question.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any slides.
Okay, Nina, go to the top bar of the Zoom, and do you see next to where it might say sign in, to the left of that, you might see
A view?
a rectangle. Yeah, so go to side by side gallery, or
I've never had this trouble, but I see sort by gallery.
Or speaker view.
or speaker view. Mine is on a side by side gallery, and I can see the slides and the speakers. And
Hang on.
participants. Okay.
Sort by gallery.
So try those different views. I'm going to have him continue while you try that. Okay.
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 Sorry.
It's okay. So as I was saying, we're really committed, and one thing that you will definitely see from the proposal of potential changes that we'll release with these plans is really a commitment to this fair and equitable distribution of housing across all parts of the city. And that means both kind of overall housing and also dedicated affordable housing. And then additionally, we wanted to target our growth strategy strongly along nodes of transit. So both for environmental reasons and also because that is a smart way to grow and a way to accommodate growth where people have access to the resources that they need. They could have access to childcare, grocery store, other things that are accessible via transit if they live near those transit lines. So we looked both at Metro Rail and also the Better Bus Network and Move DC future bus networks that are planned. So this is just a synopsis of some maps that we showed at the November workshops, which went over these different growth approaches. You can see kind of the walk shed buffers along the transit corridors of where we were taking the first look at kind of deeper dives as to where there were opportunities for growth, both downtown and along these transit corridors. We know downtown is really well served by transit already, and it's also a place where there's lots of opportunity with different potential federal sites that might be transferred over to district management or private management and disposed of by the federal government, looking at how do we convert some of those into new neighborhoods and how do we transition from vacant office space into more residential living downtown. So some of what we heard really strong support from both the workshops, and then we had a virtual workshop for a month and a half or so after the November in-person workshops completed, where roughly 3/4 of respondents were in support of all of the various growth approaches that we presented, with 82% in support of building up around metro stations. I will note a lot of growth around metro stations we did address within the 2021 amendment. We did pursue a lot of additional density around metro as well. So we tried to look at where there were remaining opportunities for that, but also we're expanding out into the bus corridors to find additional opportunities for different types of housing too that could support larger units and potentially more affordable home ownership. We heard a lot of desire for family-sized units. We also heard a lot of desire for affordability at all levels, from deeply affordable to kind of market rate affordable and naturally occurring affordable. We also heard about housing diversity, different types of households, different sizes of households, and the needs as people age across the spectrum of needs for their house. And then housing, converting office to residential downtown and increasing density was a common theme throughout. So this is kind of in another way, kind of some of the top things that we heard about, but lots of support for like multifamily and family-sized units and transit-oriented housing. The top 3 amenities we heard were retail, green space, recreation, and grocery stores, which has been consistent, as I showed from phase 1 and phase 2, hearing similar things. And then just another slide too to think about, because we know this is the Environmental Justice Coalition, and we're definitely happy to answer some additional questions on how environmental justice is factoring into kind of this plan and its policies in the future land use map. But we are really thinking about like climate mitigation and adaptation as we think through drafting some of these policies that'll go into the plan, and also through our choices in the future land use map. Definitely like having a transit forward approach is something that is not lost on us, that is a more environmentally sustainable and responsible thing to do, grow along where we have good access to transit. We also, through the place type approach I mentioned, we'll have a lot of policy in one place. It'll also be policy that can be tied to the block level. And so that's a place where we can have additional targeted policies that address things like shade in the public realm, cooling opportunities through green space, opportunities for seating and kind of places for socialization, so permeable paving, other things like that. So there's a way to address environmental considerations on a very local block level policy guidance that'll be in the place type section. And then we continue to work very closely with all of our other agency partners. So we've been in communication with the Department of Energy and Environment, and have utilized a lot of their data as we're thinking through this plan and kind of assessing the data resources that we have and where the gaps and the needs are. And so continuing to work with the Climate Ready DC team, the Cool DC team, and kind of their heat exposure and heat vulnerability mapping to think about where can we target and what types of policies make the most sense for communities that are more heat vulnerable, as well as flooding. And so continuing those conversations as we get into more of kind of the drafting the plan over the next few months before the public release, we'll definitely be coordinating with our agency partners. And then just finally, as Ryan had mentioned at the start, this is the RSVP. You can scan this QR code if you have your phone and you are pointing at the screen, you can get the code. We can actually, I think, put the link to the RSVP, maybe Nadia, in the chat so people can RSVP there. And love to see you out on either Wednesday night, March 18th, from 6 to 8, or Saturday, March 21st. They're both going to be at MLK Library. And there will be both kind of an open house format where we'll present a lot of information, have staff that are stationed across the open house to engage and explain the information, kind of field questions. And then there'll be 2 different breakout sessions within each one, within each of the meetings, to have deeper conversations around some key policy questions that we have as we are in this phase of the plan. So I think with that, that is the end of our presentation, and happy to kind of answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I would love it if you could start with the questions that I put in the chat that were sent over.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why I wanted to ask, what is the most effective way to use the comp plan to address EJ is that, we had an experience with the comp plan in the past where there's a lot of text, and there's a lot of text that doesn't have any legislative force. So there was a lot of ideas, and I understand, the comp plan is being completely rewritten, and maybe this will change, but the idea was there was like lots of chapters, lots of language, lots of ideas that there was no force of law behind it. The thing that is most enforced is the maps. And so I'm glad that you are speaking, kind of focusing on the maps. And I definitely want to hear more about the place types and the block level policy attached to the place types. And if you could give some like real substantial examples of how we could use that block level place type policy to do exactly what you said, have cooling measures, have, other interventions on things like heat. But I wonder if you could speak, both broadly and very specifically about how can the comp plan be used to advance environmental justice?
Yes, so I'll pick up on this. The specifics that Nick was talking about are really embedded in the place types. And the reason why that's important is our current comprehensive plan is 1,200 pages long. It's a very difficult document to use. Anyone who uses it has the same opinion. It's very difficult. We are holding ourselves to a goal of about 200 pages for this new comprehensive plan. And so it is going to be a very different document to use. And the reason that we're creating this shorter document is so that it's easier to understand what the government's policies are, so that we can have a meaningful conversation about our choices together. That's kind of a ground level approach of making this document easy to understand and use, and what our policy, and so that we can all work together. How that's going to work is the place types are the most important part of this new approach to the comprehensive plan. What we're doing with these place types is that instead of having maybe a paragraph of policy for each land use category, like a residential medium density, we're going to have a page or 2 pages of policies for each one of those areas. And those policies are going to bring together the information is in many different chapters of the current comprehensive plan to be a lot clearer about what can you do in this space, and what are the considerations you need to have. Some of those considerations are going to be heat and flooding, and we're going to provide guidance around shade and around how to manage water on the sites as well. Those are some of the areas, and as we're going to release the draft comprehensive plan in the fall is our current plan. And that will be the time to weigh in on the details of the place types. I think that's gonna be a really valuable place. So I would call that more climate justice than environmental justice. And I think that's gonna be a really important place to weigh in. I wanna be kind of careful with terms here. In terms of environmental justice, one of the big things we're doing is we're really focusing on growing around transit. And now what that means is that we wanna have more people riding buses and trains so that our air quality is better. That's one of the things the comprehensive plan is that it can be effective at achieving from an environmental justice perspective. Another one of the areas that we have considered is changing land use designations for industrial land, or what we call production, distribution, and repair land. DC Council asked the Office of Planning to conduct a report on production, distribution, and repair lands to understand how we could change those. And what we found is that the land we have is highly used by the government, by things that are a really big problem if they move out of the city. And so I don't expect to make very many changes to industrial land use in this comprehensive plan, because we're kind of hitting the limit of what the city needs to work well. What that means is that we're going to be we will have policies for buffering those uses, but the regulation of these really important things that operate in the district is going to be the important point. So, Teresa, you were asking about what can we do in the comprehensive plan. This is an area where I don't think we're going to be able to make a lot of land use map changes. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't advocate for them. We encourage you to share that feedback with us. But ultimately, this how much we change industrial land use is going to be a decision that council is going to have to weigh in pretty heavily on. And our study has found that it's probably not a very good idea to change very much land use category, if any, in the district for industrial land. So that's going to be one of the more difficult conversations. Parisa, Dr. Phoenix, I know others in this call, we've talked about industrial land in the past. And I want to just kind of signpost, that the production, distribution, and land use report that we released is what's informing our approach. And we acknowledge it's a conversation that's going to need to continue through the comprehensive plan. So we encourage you to share that feedback. But I also want to acknowledge that that's a discussion that's likely going to reach its full conclusion when we send the comprehensive plan for council's consideration. That's going to be something that they're going to weigh on pretty heavily. I'm going to pause here. That's on.
Yeah. So just so I'm understanding, so you're saying you are considering having some of those specific policies, block level policies attached to industrial lands or PDR lands as well, not just the residential lands.
That's
but
correct.
You're considering it, but you haven't. So I think that's an area that we would definitely want to work very closely with you on.
Yeah.
Because not all industrial uses are the same, and there are some that are extremely harmful to be next door to residential homes and others less so, right? Other PDR less so. So I think we would like to work with you on that. I think the other thing is, I really urge the Office of Planning to undertake a study to identify not just eliminating industrial lands, but repositioning, spreading them out in a different way. Because, for instance, sometimes there are sites that are PDR that come up for sale that could be a better location. It's not near people's homes for one of the government's uses, when currently you have, over concentrated sites, for instance, on W Street and around Ivy City. And that's because of a history of a failure of planning to address equity and over concentrating these things in particular neighborhoods. So I understand that the desire to say we can't have a net loss of industrial land because we have all of these needs, but there doesn't seem to be a planning element to identify where are these best located and how can we, maybe over time, start to relocate and do this better. Do you want to?
Yeah, and we're supportive of that. The production, distribution, and repair land use report specifically calls for government facilities to be balanced where people use those facilities. That's not exactly something the comprehensive plan is great at, but that also doesn't, but encourage people to share that feedback with us as we go through the process to help figure out what, and we'll keep working to figure out what is appropriate to handle in the comprehensive plan and what's appropriate to handle other places. But that feedback is helpful about district uses. In addition to that, we are also working to increase the types of uses that are allowed in other commercial areas across the city to reduce some of the pressure on industrial lands to make them work in a little more balanced way. So that's another one of the areas that we're looking at to carry forward. And so, these are areas that there's some room to discuss, but I want to, the PDR report is going to be a really helpful guide as to where we're heading. So I've dropped that in the chat for folks who haven't seen this before. I know, Parisa, you and I have talked about this a bit.
We have, and I just want to say for the group that the PDR report, unfortunately, really didn't take EJ into consideration at all. It was a so-called market-based study of what are the industrial needs of the city and not looking at its effect on human beings or the environment. So there's I think a real, omission. I did want you to also address the anti-displacement strategy, the status of it, because give a little background on it, the strategy, why it's required, what's it going to entail, and how is it being factored into the land use map?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I'm going to start with the bad news first, is that I don't have a release date for you on the strategy. The good news is that we are incorporating our research on anti-displacement into the planning we're doing for the comprehensive plan. At these workshops, we're going to share some of the information about where we see the risk of displacement and collect some feedback on that risk. And the anti-displacement approach we're taking is designed to center racial equity and the experience of people who have been impacted by displacement, either by just the fear of it or the actual experience. of being displaced in one way or another. So those are things we're bringing into the conversation. What that means is that we're thinking really hard about how the city grows in areas where residents have the greatest risk of displacement and what policies that we can implement to reduce the risk of displacement where it does exist.
Okay, and I just want to say for the background of the audience that we have discussed this before, that there's language specific in the comp plan. I'll see if I can pull it up quickly to put in the chat that says what a strategy should include. And Ryan has let me know that DEMPED was the lead agency. Is that still the case? Was the lead agency on?
They were the lead agency for the research portion.
Okay.
OPU is the lead agency for the anti-displacement document itself.
Okay.
I don't have release dates, but we do have resources informing our planning work, and that we will be daylighting as we go through the process.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, again, this is very concerning that it seems to have been, I mean, I understand you're saying there's been data that you guys have been looking at, but, you know, we're now again doing a planning process and we haven't as a public looked at, you know, what are the forces of displacement? What are the different experiences shaping displacement? What are the interventions, you know, that could be utilized? And some of those are policy tools and budgetary tools and, you know, training and, you know, legal support and other things that are not necessarily a map strategy, but the density issue and the way that new development can have a ripple effect in terms of a displacement pressure is something that should be talked about prominently within the land use map discussion.
And it will be. That is something we're centering for that discussion.
Okay.
So, you know, we will be bringing that in, and, you know, these conversations will continue throughout the entire planning process.
Yeah. And I'd say also, Parisa, something that we've heard a lot about from these focus group conversations that we've had. So talking to residents that have a real fear of displacement in small group discussions and talking about what their hopes are for both their neighborhood, but also the types of housing they want to see in their neighborhood without being displaced. So yeah, we are having those conversations and we'll continue to.
Okay, I want to go ahead and call on Dr. Phoenix, and then there's a couple of questions in the chat we'll lift up.
Yeah, my question just really had to do with health disparities. When I look at reports that have been issued by other parts of DC government, like DC Health, for example, the Office of Health Equity, it's clear that there are health disparities that seem to correspond with the placement of facilities and some of the decisions that were made in the previous planning processes. So I'm wondering if you've kind of explicitly addressed health in terms of principles that you're building into this new planning process to try to address some of those health disparities and to reverse decisions that may have been made in the past that have contributed to these health disparities.
We are not specifically addressing health in the comprehensive plan. You know, that doesn't mean that we're not engaging things like the social determinants of health, as well as the quality of the environment around us. But we're not health planners. It's not our area of expertise. But we do work with the Office of Health Equity at the Department of Health, and that's where the connection comes in, is that, you know, we're really focusing on clarifying what the district's policy is for land use, and we work with the Department of Health to help create good outcomes across the city. I know that maybe isn't a very satisfying response.
Well, yeah, one thing I just add too, Ryan, is something that's come up a lot in our conversations is access to more local health facilities. So like clinics or urgent cares or pharmacies is a big one that comes up a lot in communities that often lack access to other types of services and amenities like grocery stores. And so thinking about and going back to the displacement, you know, the risk of displacement question as well, you have kind of this twofold conundrum in a lot of neighborhoods where you don't have the retail and the amenities and the services, and you're also there's a fear of displacing if you add kind of growth pressure to those areas. So we're really having a lot of conversations with residents to try to figure out what's the balance that could lead to both good service and retail opportunity, but also protect all the residents that are there from displacement pressure.
Okay, and Frederick, I see your hand. I'm going to go just real quickly to the chat questions. Sabrina, do you want to speak out loud about your question here?
Sure. Douglas Development had is initiating case 2411. I can't get that out of my head. A 3-block wide warehouse that's in the area where the Walmart was supposed to be. And we don't know who the tenants are going to be, but they're talking about having this big warehouse right here at Ivy City, between 5C and 5D. So they did say that they weren't going to use chemical storage. They wasn't going to use it as a chemical storage. And I'm not sure exactly why they would consider using that as a chemical storage facility, but we don't know who or what the tenants are going to be, and how is this compatible with our communities and the housing development?
You know, it's a really good question. And you know, one of the things that's really important is that the Office of Planning will update the zoning for New York Avenue after we adopt this comprehensive plan. The policies and map in this comprehensive plan will inform that zoning amendment. I don't quite know how the zoning case is going to play out. I've never seen one like this particular case, and I don't have a lot of advice for you on the case itself. But this comprehensive plan will inform the Office of Planning's future zoning for the area, and it's really important that we get it that we build a plan that advances the city in a great way. You know, I understand the concern in this area and with that warehouse.
Ryan, I appreciate you saying that the comp plan is going to be finalized before zoning actions or before the Office of Planning initiates zoning changes along New York Avenue. But this applicant has already requested the zoning change. So would that potentially be reversed by an OP? But if the comp plan then comes back and says, whatever the zoning commission just approved is actually inconsistent with the new comp plan, would OP then initiate a new change?
This is where it's a situation I've never quite seen, and I don't know what would happen. What I can say is, in general, once you get zoning approval, people typically pursue building permits. Once you have building permits, you can build and open the building. There is a potential that a building would be built under the current land use and zoning in place. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. It's a very complicated situation. I'm not quite sure how this one's going to play out.
Okay, I wanted to give Nate a chance to ask his question in the chat, which raises federal lands, I believe, as well. Nate, go ahead, and then I have the 2 hands up.
Oh, hi. I was just noticing recently the soldiers' home in Northwest, and the fact that it's enormous, and only the northern part of it is actually inhabited. There's probably, I don't know, 100 or 200 acres of a golf course that's like not used anymore, and a bunch of other green space that like would be good green space, except it's not accessible to the public. I think it's federal, but I think that there's also some openness in this administration, and maybe also future administrations, to transferring some federal land to the city if it's deemed, not needed. Is that something that you have looked at all? Because I seem to remember some years ago that there was talk about building something along the Irving Street side across from Washington Hospital Center.
Yeah, there have been talks over the years about the Armed Forces Retirement Home. The current comprehensive plan shows quite a bit of development on the southeast corner of that site. Mm-hmm. That's the position that the federal government is in agreement with today. Mm-hmm. And so, if the federal government chose to pursue that redevelopment, it's available today in the southwest corner. It's a very large amount of land use capacity available there. Mm-hmm. If the federal government or other in particular wanted to revisit allowing development on the western portion of the site, that's something we'd entertain, but not something that we're seeking as a major move right now. There's kind of strong views among the people who run the old soldiers' home, as well as within the federal government in that area. Uh-huh. So we're open to it, but not pursuing.
You mean they have strong feelings about wanting to keep the campus as is?
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 hands up. Frederick, then Anthony, then Tanae.
No problem. Thank you for the presentation. It was definitely informative. One thing in particular, I actually have like two questions if possible, but I also want to be respectful of time. So in regards to the place type being incorporated into the land use, I definitely have seen that as well in other comprehensive plans. I'm a planner as well. I've worked throughout the country actually. One thing I did want to ask is that has there been any conversation to incorporate green zones or environmental benefit districts as a actual zoning use, or even something that could be used as a way to mitigate the scale of industrial uses in proximity to homes?
Yeah, that's not a tool that those aren't practices that I've contemplated for the district. But it'd be helpful maybe if you unpacked a little bit how you might imagine it would work.
No problem
The
at all.
challenge that I see is that most of our industrial uses are built today. So, if we were talking about new industrial land, that's where I'm familiar with those strategies. But with established industrial land, I'm not familiar with how those strategies might work, and it'd be helpful to know what you've seen.
No problem at all. So there, and I've had this conversation with Empower DC. So one way to look at it from, if we weren't talking about for future land use, I think that's obvious. If we're saying that this, if we're going to look at specific lots in an area that's already overburdened, we're going to say that, let's say for the resilience hubs, like one in Ivy Center or Ivy City, we're going to say in a mile-and-a-half radius, this is not going to be considered a green zone. This area is not going to be prioritized for any form of industrial development. On the same end of that, we're going to make sure that any new development is also going to encourage sustainable designing practices, LEED certified buildings, anti-displacement measures, so on and so forth. For the current industrial zones, you would say something like, okay, a green zone, if we're going to say on a specific lot, we're going to say, okay, that if we're going to incorporate mixed use, or we're going to say residential and mixed use as a place type, that these areas are now going to be designed in a way that's going to minimize the scale of air pollution, right? I mean, there's multiple ways creatively to look at it from like a physical standpoint. It's about making sure that if we're going to anticipate an increase in density, and we're going to say that these areas are already zoned for housing, then we're going to make sure that these homes and the people that are going to be living in proximity to these pollution centers are not going to be impacted severely, let alone displaced in that same scale. I could share some research on this as well, and we can have a more in-depth conversation because I don't want to take time from others. But I think that is an opportunity to look at it from a physical standpoint as well as like a buffer zone standpoint as well.
Yeah, it sounds like we're fairly aligned in some of these cases. So, for example, the district has kind of world leading buildings and sustainable building standards. We're really focused around the risk of displacement growing in a way that has the lowest risk of displacement that we can have, as well as policies to make the way we grow as resilient and sustainable as possible. So those are all areas that I think we are in alignment. I think the areas would be helpful to explore is what are some of the best strategies for established industrial uses? Because I think that's the essential challenge that we're facing from an environmental justice perspective. And you've got some good ideas that'd be helpful to learn a little more about.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely send a follow-up email because again, as we all know, DC is its own atmosphere, if you will, in regards in comparison to the rest of the country. But I think there is a way to make sure that industry is done in an ecologically defined way that prioritizes people and planet. My second point that I wanted to bring up is I've been working with the City of Plainford, PG County in Maryland, and they've been incorporating implementation strategy as well as implementation tracking in conjunction with an EJ Commission, like EJ Community Commission and EJ Community Planning Commission. I was wondering if there's any implementation strategy that you're already working on that could be tracked as we lead towards the year 2050.
We are planning on tracking our progress. It's a little bit early, our notions are vague at this point, but we are contemplating tracking our goals to the future. The one, hold ourselves accountable, and two, figure out what's working, what's not working, so we can adjust course as we need to achieve our goals together.
Okay. That's it for me, and I'm looking forward to following up.
I dropped my email in the chat, by the way. Please feel free to reach out to me.
You got it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anthony, and then Tanae, and then I have one final thing before we close out. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I joined late, so apologies if you've already addressed this, but is there a particular timeline for agencies to provide, recommendations or, I guess, like their input on like what should be included in the comp plan? So that's like data, that's, their opinion, community's opinion, but more so like on the agency side.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, good to see you. It's a little bit different this time around. So we did seek agency input early in the process with the last amendment because we wanted to understand how they're using the plan and how it should be amended. This time around, we've been in dialogue with our partner agencies, and as we have drafts of the comprehensive plan, we're going to collect their input. So what we release in the fall will show be inclusive of their input.
Okay, so then there'll be like other rounds for them to like amend the amendments or whatever they submitted.
We'll be working kind of inside the government to understand all of the internal government stakeholders' viewpoints and policy preferences. So what the public sees will be a synthesis of the internal discussion among government agencies.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Today?
Yes, my question is in regards to the area where the new RFK Stadium is being planned. It's twofold. What were the plans considered for that through this comprehensive plan? And then the second question is, are there any plans for displacing the current residents that's being held at DC jail or CTF in your plan?
That's a really good question. So in regard to RFK, the district government, there's a bunch of agencies involved, are planning for that site. The Office of Planning is leading the master plan for that site. That process is running in parallel to the comprehensive plan. And what that means is this is a really complicated change to the city, and we're having a series of detailed conversations. I believe they're having a meeting on March 24th, where there's a lot of issues to discuss about that site and how to get it right as we go forward. We'll be incorporating the feedback from that master plan into the comprehensive plan. It's a kind of a world to itself, and we want to make sure that there's really full and deep conversations about that approach.
Yeah.
In terms of sorry, Nick.
I was just going to say March 24th and March 28th are RFK meetings. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we encourage everyone to attend those. In terms of the jail, that's something we'll take a look at. That's not something that we've been considering, but we'll put it on our list to look into and see if there's some action we need to take.
Do you have a link for those? Go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just to be clear, the jail site is not in the RFK redevelopment plan site. That's a separate site.
But you did say it will be considered in the comprehensive 2050 plan.
Everything with the planning of the master plan for RFK will, yes, definitely. And any other large site changes, yeah.
There'll be announcements about the RFK meetings in the in the coming weeks in advance. Okay. Sometimes we get announced a little bit close to the meetings.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I get a lot of the communications regarding those community meetings for RFK. Thank you.
Okay, I see Nina raised her hand, and then I'll ask my last question. Go ahead, Nina. You're on mute.
I'm going to put these into one question. We're going to have a new mayor elected in November. This falls, and then starting in January, this falls right bang in your timeline, at critical points in your timeline. I just wanted, okay, that's my comment. That's my note. Mm-hmm. My question is actually, how much are you budgeted for communications throughout this process, and do you think it's enough to really get the word out and engage more than the usual? And be honest, I mean, usually there's not enough budgeted, and it's an afterthought when actually it's one of the critical pieces, unless it's budgeted in. I'm answering for you. Yeah. So I'll stop there.
So I'll say, the Office of Planning has devoted a lot of its own resources to, the communicating about the comprehensive plan, making sure people are hearing about it. Our communications team devotes most of their time, frankly, to making sure that we're conducting good outreach and communication about the comprehensive plan. And unfortunately, we don't discuss the details of our budgets, but we have made significant commitments, significant choices to prioritize communications in the resources we have available.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are obviously, thin times in the district. So it's not an ideal situation, but I'm really proud of what we've been able to put together with the resources available.
That's good to hear. And budget season's coming up. So if you really think you need more to deal with that piece of it, make sure you notify folks that will testify on your behalf.
And
And
in
not
terms of
just
the,
against you for what you're doing.
these are important conversations, and I do think that the conversation is going to get quite a lot larger in the coming months. We're going to share a future land use map next week, and I'm pretty sure that's going to spread the conversation. I think people are going to be talking to each other quite a bit. So I'll let you in the secret. I'm counting on a little bit of earned media here, and I'm pretty confident we're going to get it.
Good.
So
Thank you.
that's part of the strategy. With the mayoral election, yes, that's something that we are aware of. We've known from the beginning that was a possibility. And, one of the things is this comprehensive plan needs to last 2 decades in the future. It'll serve many mayors. And that's part of our charge in general, is to write a comprehensive plan that's going to serve this city across many administrations. And so, yeah, there may be some changes when the administration changes, but we're designing this plan to be a good fit for many different administrations. So that's part of how we're approaching this work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question about the political change that's happening. I wonder, is there a legal requirement that the comp plan be finalized by a certain date?
Council included a stipulation in the legislation where they adopted the 2021 amendment for a date in the summer of 2027.
Okay.
Given the next, we will be on track to meet that date. The next administration may weigh in.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're going to give them the opportunity to meet it. That's the.
Sounds good. There's one last question in the chat. Anything you can share about Poplar Point?
It's a good question. I will tell you, I am not up to speed enough on Poplar Point to give you an accurate answer. So I think that's the best update I can give you today.
And the planning for that is not being led by OP, is that right? Is that
OP and DEMPED are partnering on the master planning and EIS. I've been involved in it over the years, but I'm not currently up to speed, so I don't want to give everyone incorrect information.
Okay, and then we have a request for the slides, so if you can share those, we'll send them to the attendees.
Yep.
Okay, folks, so as you heard, the future land use map is rolling out. That's going to be very interesting to see. We didn't get any spoilers today, so that's a shame. But on the 18th and the 21st, we'll see something. And then I'm sure on this group, we will be discussing that in full. And Ryan and Nick and others, I'd love to have a follow-up to figure out how do we work on those industrial land use policy categories. And of course, the anti-displacement piece and the racial equity piece, very important to us to see implemented, carried out through the maps. So hopefully that's what we'll see.
We'll have a little more to share on racial equity soon. That one we will have to in the near future.
Okay, very good. Well, we do want to thank you again for taking time to be with us today. And I know, I think I can count on you to come back if the group wants to talk again. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys so much.
These are important conversations. We're really happy that you had us here, and it makes our work better having these conversations.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate it. We're at pretty much our time. If there was any, announcements that anybody needed to share, feel free to do that right now. Otherwise, we will send you off into this beautiful spring air, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Oh, you have an announcement, Dr. Phoenix? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to let folks know that the campaign is co-sponsoring a data center bus tour in collaboration with Sierra Club that'll take place on Wednesday, March 18th. So next Wednesday, if you're interested, you can take this free bus tour. It's being narrated by Nature Forward, Lydia Lawrence from Nature Forward. We're going to tour. We're going to get off the bus at 2 data centers in Northern Virginia, and then we're going to do kind of a narrated drive-by in Data Center Alley along Route 28. I think it's going to be very informative, and folks who are, kind of interested in the implications of these data centers. We have one that might be constructed on our north border in Prince George's County in Landover. There's one that's planned there, and they're really springing up all over the place in Northern Virginia. So please reach out to me if you're interested. I can send you the link, and I'll send it out through the listserv as well. But if you're interested in hopping on the bus, we'll leave DC at 9. We'll reach Northern Virginia by 10:30. The tour will start there. It should take about 90 minutes, and we'll have some snacks on the bus. So, love you to participate.
Could you send us the info for sign up for that?
Yeah.
Yes,
That
She'll
would
send
be
it.
great. Maybe along with the slide deck. Yeah, thanks.
yes.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Take care.